Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Doing good actually today. Can you give a short introduction who you are?
Yep, Peter first.
I'm Peter. I am the brewer at Motel Beer. Cory next.
I'm Cory. I'm not the brewer at Motel Beer. No, I brew the coffee rather than the beer.
Okay.
And as far as what Motel Beer and Coffee is our project that we embarked on together a couple of years ago. And yeah, the idea was just to make essentially nice beer and coffee that we wanted to drink, something that would be fun for both normal people and the nerds out there. And along the way, we've also made the mission kind of having the beer side be informed by the coffee side and the coffee side informed by the beer side in order to make both better.
You guys do have also interesting personal stories, actually. Can you explain really quickly what your backgrounds are, and how you actually found each other and founded the brewery together?
Well, we met in the basement at the Markthalle 9.
Shout out to Markthalle 9.
Yeah, not at the Christmas party, which is where some people meet, but a lot of people meet, yeah.
And so I worked for Heidenpeter's, the brewery in the basement, and Cory was working the coffee magic from the basement underneath Cafe 9. And so we crossed paths all the time downstairs. And one day, it was actually right before the second Stadtland food, we decided to collaborate and make a beer with a little bit of coffee in it. And not a dark beer with coffee, a light beer, which was at the time crazy.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
And it was also
So
because
Yeah.
neither of us really liked beer with coffee, and so it was kind of a challenge to ourselves to see if we could come up with something that we were willing to drink.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to ask that anyways, because I think, so you are kind of bending the rules of drinks, right? Because you make beers and you change up also the selection of beers that you're making. But you're kind of bending the rules between wine, beer, coffee. The coffee is also in the same casks as the casks. Is that the word?
Or the cans.
Cans. Sorry. I was like, that's the wrong. The same cans as the beer. You made a beer, if I'm not wrong, also with some in collaboration with some winemakers. Can you talk a little bit about that and the idea behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Right. Well, I mean, so as far as putting both in the same container, we decided to fill cans in Germany, which is not necessarily a popular decision, but we did it because for the quality of the beverage inside, it's the best. You know, the cans, they're like tiny kegs, and on top of that, it allowed us to. There's a tiny dog who just
jumped
joined
on the
us.
couch.
It allowed us to use kind of one machine for both products, and also for a small brewery like this, it's actually way more environmentally friendly than bringing in heavy pallets of bottles from other countries where they're produced to Germany every time we want to fill stuff. And then as far as working with the other producers, it's kind of
it's how like I said earlier, it's how we started the business. It's how Motel started. We collaborated on something born into the basement of the Markthalle for Stadtland food, and it was an unusual collaboration at the time.
Yeah.
And we kept doing that. We kept finding people that did cool things to do something that maybe is not necessarily what you would expect.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was researching on you and researching on the questions I will ask you, I actually realized, okay, I actually don't really know a lot about the whole craft brewery scene in Germany. And I realized that it's actually what you're doing is very special because you're doing really new things. And especially also in the cans, for example. Can you give us a short background on generally the craft brewery scene in Germany, and is it difficult for you to bring in new innovations also with the Reinheitsgebot? Here we go. That word was missing. What is the situation for small breweries like yours? Is it difficult to go against also the lobby of the big breweries? How is it? Talk about it.
Yeah, let's break it down. The first one, the first thing, craft brewing in Germany. Like, we should split it up into maybe two concepts, because craft brewing in Germany has existed forever, basically. I mean, there's still breweries in Upper Franconia brewing the same single beer that brewed for 300 years. It's like, so that's craft brewing for me as well. The sort of American style craft brewing of tons of hops and new things and trying fun stuff, and that's relatively new in Germany. And then, what was the second part of the question? It was about
how it is for small breweries in comparison to the bigger, already established brewers that like maybe the Germans go to.
Right. I mean, that's certainly more difficult. It's hard. Like, distribution is really difficult. Economy, like buying ingredients is expensive if you're buying small amounts. Space costs money, so if you have to buy a lot, and malt takes up tons of space. If you buy a lot of malt, you need somewhere to put it, then you have to use it fast enough, and then you have so yeah, big companies always have it easier than small ones, I think, in terms of production, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I feel like also with the bigger breweries, most of them are built on brewing one beer and a lot of it, like really massive amounts of one beer, whereas our main audience is people who are interested in tasting different things, exploring different wines, beers, and so if we were to only make one beer, I think people would quickly lose interest, and it would be hard for us just to sell enough. And so just by making different beers, like all of our costs go up because of needing to buy small amounts of a bunch of different ingredients.
Right.
How is that possible with offering your customers different kinds of beers and maybe also exciting beers with the Reinheitsgebot?
Well, the Reinheitsgebot is a little bit complicated because it's mainly focused on bottom fermenting beers, so they're much more strict about controlling that. So, for instance, we made a beer in collaboration last year with Höfe-Gemeinschaft Pommern and the Tlaxcali tortilla makers, and so they have.
All right.
So we used their organic corn grown in MacPom to make a beer, which is essentially the same ingredients as a Corona, the famous beer from Mexico. And
not the virus.
Not the virus. No. I was like,
I had to be specific about that. Yeah, yes. True. And we applied for permission to brew it again this year, and we were denied. We weren't allowed to put corn in the beer. Because it's not one of the ingredients you're allowed to use in a bottom fermenting good lager beer.
Yeah, I think that's definitely. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I do think it's important to mention the trivia that the Reinheitsgebot was created to protect the food supply, not to protect the quality of the beer necessarily.
Yes,
because they were worried that people were going to turn everything into stuff that gets you drunk, rather than food.
Right.
For sure. I think that's a whole different conversation we need to have, right? Like, I think that's a conversation for another 45 minutes, I guess. So you mentioned already you are using high quality produce. It's expensive to get them because you can't get them in like the big amounts that bigger breweries are able to buy them for. But I do feel, at least for the normal groceries that people are shopping now, people are more aware of the prices. And my thesis is right now they might actually do pay a higher price for it. Do you feel that too? Do you have the same feeling? Do you have the feeling that there's like little chance right now to communicate better why your beers are maybe more expensive than Heineken? Or I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say names right now, but
sure, yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've always been saying the same thing. We've never changed our message, but now people, I'm not sure why, but people are listening lately.
Yeah.
Maybe they have more time, or maybe you're right that like a lot of people have changed their mindset and suddenly are listening more to what we're saying. But we're definitely getting a lot of like really good reactions, also bad reactions, but like a lot more reactions than before. But people are listening more because we've been saying the same thing forever.
Yeah.
And now people are really listening.
I mean, I think it does on one hand, it helps that people have been sitting at home and have been trying to find ways to occupy their time. And so in that way,
like Ludwig Stein said, we're just drinking all day. Great.
But I mean, that's cool,
no different.
because like at some point, like definitely it's been like people have been ending up like looking at what we're doing a bit more closely than they ever did before. Mm-hmm. And I think it also helps that like honestly, there is a benefit that we're experiencing in a way from restaurants and bars being closed, because like even personally, like I spent like a reasonable amount of money at restaurants and bars out of my monthly salary, and without spending that money, I think people still want to spend it on something, and they're still ready to spend it on food and drink. And so I think you see any place that's a grocery, or even places like Lodenstein that have been converting kind of into selling Lebensmittel, like foodstuffs for home, that people are willing to spend a higher price on food for home now, just because they're saving so much money in not going out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very specific on the quarantine situation right now, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you think in the future, when life is hopefully getting back a little bit towards normal? What is your outlook? Because I am really torn between, okay, people are more open for these like artisanal produce, and they're looking at what they're actually eating, and they're looking at what's also maybe healthy. They're looking at the people behind it, so they really want to support. On the other hand, people might also have less money. So where do you think this is going? Do you think this crisis that we have right now is a chance for those like artisanal and maybe higher priced produce, or is it, will it be harder to communicate that because it is seen as a luxury product that is maybe not necessarily like flour?
I think honestly that's going to involve a lot of factors that are hard to predict right now. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of things in even something that people don't think about, like logistics chains breaking down or becoming much more expensive than they have been for years now. So, you know, the like stuff that people are used to having for cheaper prices, like tins of tomatoes from Italy or stuff like that, is going to start getting more and more expensive, to the point where it might be that what was once the expensive local option is now the more reasonably priced option, if you're looking for something of a certain quality. And so I think there's a lot that's hard to predict, but I do hope that at least what the like small producers will have once life does get back to some semblance of normality is having had a time period where there was a lot more of a spotlight put on them, and they were hopefully able to grow their audience and even just get people accustomed to spending a bit more on their food and drink, and having grown accustomed to it will hopefully not go back.
So in my mind, when people see pretty beer bottles and they're from craft breweries, their thought is, oh, it's still just beer inside of there, and they just get a lot of money for the looks, and they just make a lot of money generally with the beer. Mm-hmm. How is that actually in the industry? Because before we talked a lot about the margins, and I think it's a big topic right now also in the press that, oh, suddenly people realize restaurants actually have really, really small margins and cannot survive for like a month or two. How is it in your industry? What is the Can you talk a little bit about it? Is that a wrong perception?
No, it's totally correct. You want to handle that one?
Sure. Yeah, we are, I have to say, restaurants, I think, have it worse than anyone because, they essentially have to work with raw materials that are extremely perishable for the most part. And so for them being shut down means that all this money they've invested is just sitting there rotting, and there's nothing they can do about it.
And they cannot sell more beers afterwards. They cannot seat more people afterwards, like double the amount.
They can't. No, exactly. And I mean, in that sense, we also can't sell more beers afterwards. It's not like, that people are just going to buy twice as much beer when this is over. And I mean, when the shutdown first happened in Berlin, we had 98% of our revenue just disappear overnight because we're mostly selling to gastronomy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, that's money that will never come back, and it hit us really hard. We had to send our sole staff member into Kurzarbeit, and we had one freelancer working for us as well. And so it's now just been the two of us doing everything in the brewery. Actually, with Marie as well. Marie, who does our design, has been jumping in and helping pack some boxes as well.
Did she do the T-shirt?
She sure did.
She did the T-shirts. Yeah. It's a nice T-shirt. But
can you buy it on your online shop?
You sure can.
As a matter of fact,
sure you can. We only have small at the moment, but the other sizes will be back in stock in about 2 weeks. So
it's a big small, though.
It is. It is a big small.
It's a good small.
Okay, good.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, our margins. I think we're a bit of a weird example for the brewing world because in a lot of ways, our approach is a bit more like the restaurants we like, where we're working directly with our producers. We're paying much, much more for our raw ingredients than other breweries are. But it is because we want to, we have a vision of something that we want to present, and kind of this working directly with our producers is both rewarding for us emotionally as well as creatively. It's fun to see what we can do with them. But it does mean that our margins are not very big. And so it's been a struggle to figure out how we can remain viable in Corona times, how we can continue pursuing this idea of working with these people we really like, who are also really passionate about what they do, but in a way where it inevitably means we have to pay more for the ingredients and we have to charge more. And especially now with people being a bit sensitive about how things cost, it means that people really pay attention to the fact that our beer does cost a bit more. And it's certainly a challenge to get people to understand where that comes from, that it's not because we both drive Audis and vacation in, where's an expensive place to vacation? I don't even know.
I don't even know.
Yeah, I don't even know. So I don't even know what a vacation is, to be honest. So it's but I mean, that's it's a challenge to communicate that in a way that is also constructive. So I feel like that's one of the main things we've been working on, weirdly enough, the past few weeks, is actually communication.
I want to go back on that point later. You said in a post that you did the other day, you said we decided to do this. You need to support us now because we decided to maybe take a job that will not bring us to the Maldives or whatever and make us buy an Audi.
Yeah.
Do you kind of regret that in this time right now sometimes? Honestly, I had the first week, I was like, fuck this. Why the fuck am I not working at Zalando right now? Just not thinking about it, not being insecure. And I had a small split second where I was like, shit.
I had a couple of those moments as well. It wasn't Zalando, it was SoundCloud or something. But yeah,
I don't know.
I was like, I wish I could just work from home. And, But no, I don't regret it.
I only regretted it briefly when I started to get annoyed by the number of people I knew who were like, I'm so bored. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm so bored. Just sitting at home all the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel bad though, because it's also, in a way, as much as you like to complain about working, once you're not working anymore, you realize how lucky you are to have been working and have an outlet for your energy. Because that's what it comes down to. Everyone has energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I also felt was the food community is so strong. And I don't think Zalando would ever have that in a crisis, that people support each other so well.
I think you're right, yeah.
Anyways, that gets very emotional now. Can you talk a little bit about your suppliers? Because you do have a special relationship, I would say, to your suppliers. Can you explain a little bit where you get the raw ingredients from and why you made the decision to get it exactly from those suppliers?
Sure. I mean, as Cory said at the beginning, we take inspiration from the coffee side, and we take inspiration from the beer side to make everything work the way it does. And so I think maybe Cory, you talk about sourcing coffee first, because that's where everything started. Like this sort of like this idea of working directly with a supplier came from you.
Well, it's I mean,
it's not your invention.
No, I didn't know. No, definitely not. Definitely not. No, it was but I mean, yeah, in the coffee industry, it's definitely been a trend of the last 20 years that people are working more directly with their producers, and I mean, it's been great because it's mutually beneficial in that the farmers, the producers end up with more money, and the roasters or the cafes, they end up with better coffee, essentially, because of the information exchange, and yeah, it's super rewarding for baristas who also get to put a face to the person who's actually behind the biggest portion of the labor of creating the coffee. And then also for the producers, for the first time in the hundreds of years of commercial coffee history, they actually get to have a better idea of who's drinking their coffee, like what it looks like in its final form. Many of these producers had never even tasted their own coffee until they started working directly with someone who, gave them the opportunity to. And so, for us since day one, it was really important to try to work as directly as possible, because it's still, there's a lot of bureaucracy to work through. There are a lot of old colonial structures still in place that make it difficult, but to work as directly as possible with our coffee producers and to find people who are also like-minded. And so we were really lucky to end up with a guy named Eddie Kiaka, who's in the mountains of Western Kenya. He taught himself how to do everything on the internet, because that's the day and age we were living in.
That is inspirational.
Yeah, and it's cool. He's producing everything organically, but not certifying it, because who can afford that when?
Yes. Also a whole different conversation.
Yeah. But I mean, his entire harvest last year was about 70 kilos of coffee, which is nothing, to be honest. And so, of course, it's impressive that he would even take the risk of producing it organically and processing it in a different way than other farmers in Kenya do. But for us, it was a perfect match, because it kind of matched the amount of coffee that we were looking for anyways. And so it's been super cool to